Born on March 5, 1958, Andy Gibb grew up in a family already immersed in music. The Bee Gees, his brothers Barry, Robin, and Maurice, were stars by the time Andy entered the world, and their success defined much of his early life. He didn't have the typical childhood experiences many children had. Instead, his world revolved around recording studios, concert tours, and the celebrity life. From a young age, Andy was aware of the attention his brothers garnered, and the fame that accompanied their name often made him feel isolated. Music, however, became Andy's outlet and refuge, even before he understood the full scope of his family's legacy. His first experiences with music came not as a performer, but as an observer, watching his brothers work and using the guitar as a tool to experiment with sound. While his brothers were already at the top, Andy sought to find his own voice and space in an industry that seemed too big to navigate alone, finding his own voice in the shadow of the Bee Gees. As Andy entered his teenage years, he became more serious about pursuing music on his own. He began writing songs at a young age, and by the mid-1970s, he had recorded his first demos. Despite growing up with the Bee Gees' success overshadowing him, Andy was determined to carve out a unique identity as an artist. His early music reflected a sincere desire to express himself independently from the towering shadow of his brother's fame. With his first album, Melody Fair, Andy began to showcase his talent in a way that felt authentic to him. The album wasn't a commercial success, but it marked the beginning of his journey as a solo artist. The experience of performing on smaller stages helped Andy hone his skills and connect with audiences, even though his brother Andy Gibb's breakthrough moment. In 1977, at just 19 years old, Andy Gibb's breakthrough came when he recorded the hit single, "I Just Want to Be Your Everything." The song shot to the top of the Billboard charts and marked the beginning of a whirlwind of success for the young artist. With his soft voice and magnetic presence, Andy became an instant pop sensation. "I Just Want to Be Your Everything" was followed by "Love Is Thicker Than Water" and "Shadow Dancing," both of which also reached #1 on the charts. Within a year, Andy Gibb had achieved a feat no other solo artist had done: 3 consecutive #1 singles. His rise to fame was meteoric, and by the time he turned 20, he was already a household name. But with this rapid success came the pressure to maintain that momentum, a pressure that would gradually begin to weigh on him. The pressure of fame and expectations. As Andy's success continued, the pressure of living up to the public's expectations took a toll. His music career became a relentless cycle of studio sessions, performances, and public appearances. While Andy had once sung from a place of joy and discovery, he soon found himself churning out hits without the same excitement or personal satisfaction. His role as a pop star demanded perfection. Every smile, every song, every appearance had to be calibrated to meet the public's expectations. He was no longer just a young man trying to figure out who he was. He had become a brand, a commodity to be consumed. The weight of this identity began to create an internal struggle, as Andy found himself torn between the image the public had created for him and the person he yearned to be. Despite the fame and admiration, he struggled with loneliness, a feeling that only deepened as the years passed. Music as a product versus personal expression. By 1978, Andy Gibb was at the height of his career. His album Shadow Dancing became one of the defining releases of the disco era. The performances were bigger, the crowds louder, and the accolades more frequent. But despite the success, Andy began to feel a growing sense of disillusionment. The music industry, as much as it had given him, also took from him. Music became a product, something to be manufactured according to formulas that were designed to guarantee commercial success. While Andy was still a talented vocalist and performer, his role had shifted from a creator to a performer of pre-arranged hits. The opportunity to explore his own creative voice was limited, and the commercial pressure to deliver perfect pop songs only added to the weight he was already carrying. The changing landscape of music and Andy's struggle to keep up. As the disco era began to fade by 1979, Andy found himself at the center of a cultural shift he couldn't control. The backlash against disco, culminating in events like Disco Demolition Night, marked the beginning of a new wave in American music. As rock and new wave began to rise in popularity, Andy Gibb's brand of pop music felt increasingly out of step with the times. While his music remained polished and professionally made, it no longer commanded the same level of attention. The public had moved on, and Andy was left trying to find a way to stay relevant in a rapidly changing musical landscape. His voice and stage presence remained strong, but the context had shifted. He wasn't disappearing, but he wasn't leading the charge anymore either. The pressure to remain in the public's eye, to maintain the image of the cheerful pop star, only grew as the demand for that image began to fade. The toll of fame. A life in constant motion. Fame, for all its glamour, also comes with a price. For Andy Gibb, that price was a life lived in constant motion. With a schedule packed full of performances, studio sessions, and public appearances, Andy found little time for personal reflection or stability. He moved from city to city, hotel room to hotel room, always in the public eye, but never truly able to settle. The rapid pace of his life left little space for rest or for Andy to process the changes happening both within him and around him. He was always on, always performing, always smiling for the camera. But behind the smile, Andy was exhausted, emotionally drained, and increasingly disconnected from his own sense of self. The life of a pop star had demanded everything from him, and Andy began to realize that what he had once loved about music, the thrill of creation, the joy of expression, was slipping away in the face of overwhelming expectations. The shift from a star to a familiar face. By the early 1980s, Andy Gibb's visibility in the public eye began to shift. He was still loved by his fans, still a recognizable face in pop culture, but his music no longer made the same impact it once had. Albums like After Dark were released, but they didn't capture the same magic as his earlier hits. His appearances on television shows like Solid Gold kept him visible, but the excitement surrounding him had faded. The pressure to stay relevant now required more intention. Andy had to work harder to capture the public's attention, but no matter how much he tried, he couldn't quite reclaim the same level of success he had achieved in the late 1970s. He was no longer the new, shiny pop star that everyone was talking about. Instead, he had become a familiar face, someone who was always around but never quite at the center of the action. The final years, a heart that couldn't keep up. By the time Andy reached his early 30s, the toll of the years had become too much. His body, worn down by years of grueling schedules and internal battles, finally gave out. On March 10th, 1988, Andy Gibb passed away at the young age of 30 from heart failure, a tragic end to a life filled with both brilliance and struggle. His death was sudden, a stark contrast to the public life he had lived, filled with energy, brightness, and seemingly endless promise. His passing left fans and loved ones in shock, as Andy had seemed destined for a long career. In many ways, his death was the end of an era, the era of the smooth, polished pop stars who had once ruled the charts. Andy's journey, from his rapid rise to fame to his heartbreaking decline, serves as a reminder of the fragility of fame and the pressures that come with it. While his time was short, Andy Gibb's music and legacy continue to live on.